All right, we're live and the people can hear us.
Fantastic. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today is the Shabbat, the 27th week. And for those who partook with us on Wednesday for Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, it is now the Shabbat. So hopefully you guys have been doing your part in maintaining yourself in Shabbat, keeping piety between Wednesday Roman to today, Saturday Roman. I do apologize for our slightly delayed start once again, dealing with life and also some inclement weather. For those who don't know, the Gulf and Caribbean, and obviously the state of Florida, is getting affected by right now a minor tropical storm, and people don't know how to drive when there's a little bit of rain on the road. So, as all things, we have to bear each other's burdens. In regards to just global news and current events, help all those who are in the Caribbean or the affected path of Fiona and the tropical storm developing alongside her, that you guys are preparing yourselves, are making sure you have all your supplies in the event that you either have to evacuate or hunker in place. Last thing you want to do is drive in the middle of inclement weather. It's just not safe. And we want to save ourselves from costly mistakes, as they say. Outside of that, I just continue to hold out prayers for those who are in combat, especially on the Ukrainian-Russian front, and for those who will be in combat. There's a lot of conscription orders being sent out in different regions of the world. So if it is your call to arms, that Yah give you the strength of Samson and the courage of David, so that whatever you face with pride. In regards to where we're going to be reading today, it's in the description. For those who are watching us live, once again, welcome. We will be reading Leviticus 15 through 18, or Vayikra, for those who know in Hebrew. In Hebrews 1 through 5, or Ivrim, if you know in Hebrew. My brother, Yeshayahu, will be reading for us. I will do the breakdown to the best of my abilities. And as I said last time we went live, welcome back. I know it's been a while, and I just ask that you bear with us as we have a young German Shepherd puppy who's very vocal at this time in his life. So with that, let's start with chapter 15 of Leviticus. Brother, whenever you're ready.
Leviticus chapter 15. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When any man has a running discharge out of his flesh, because of his discharge he is unclean. And this shall be his uncleanness in his discharge. Whether his flesh runs with his discharge, or his flesh is stopped up from his discharge, it is his uncleanliness in him all the days of the discharge of his flesh. Even if his flesh obstructs his discharge, it is his uncleanness.
Pause. I know we've covered this topic both in-house and in other previous streams, but for those who are new or just have a question in regards to uncleanness, I want to start off by saying uncleanness does not equate to sin. You can be unclean and not be in sin. Uncleanness can lead you to sin if you do not address the uncleanness, but uncleanness is a physical state of being. An example of running discharge. If a man catches a flu or a bodily illness, obviously one of the side effects of those things is a runny nose. We all have dealt with that, those who have children especially. That is considered discharge. That person, be it the child or the adult, would be unclean until they remove that state of uncleanness. In the event of an adult who is in service, say something like myself, if I were to have running discharge, I would be unclean and I would not be able to host the service because I would be unfit for ritual/service positions. And someone else will have to come up who is clean, for lack of better words. But just to reiterate, uncleanliness is not sin. Uncleanliness is just that. It is a state of being unclean. Continue, my brother.
Alright. Starting on verse 5. And whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until evening.
You skipped verse 4.
I did, my apologies. Let's restart from verse 4. Every bed on which he lies that has the discharge is unclean, and every object on which he sits shall be unclean. And
So this is why I said if I had a running discharge, I would be unfit for this position, because my brother or my gentleman who's behind the monitor, or my sister, or anyone that would be partaking with us in the service, if they were to go and engage in the service Seder, if I were to interact with them or interact with the objects they would be interacting with, I would make them unclean and unfit for service. Therefore, it is incumbent upon me or whoever's in a position like myself to not interact with things that will be used in the service of Yahuwah while in an unclean state. For ladies, and I believe this covers it as well down the road, uncleanness also applies to you when it comes to your monthly cycle. That would be considered a state of uncleanness. So if you are, let's say, a woman minister, you should not be ministering that week if you find yourself in that position. Continue.
starting on verse 5. And whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And
So,
he
evening being when the sun is completely set. Completely set. So, I know many use different interpretations, but let's just say for argument's sake, I touch something unclean at 9 in the morning Roman time, Eastern Standard Time, I would be unclean until the sun sets. Whatever that time may be. After I have bathed myself in Mayim and cleansed my physical state of being.
Verse 6. And he that sits on anything on which he sat that has the discharge shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And he that touches the flesh of him that has the discharge shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening.
Pause. This is also one of the early medical prevention procedures that we have. Obviously, if someone's sick and they have running discharge, he or she is a potential risk for the rest of the tribe. So this is also, for lack of better words, think of it as a medical prevention advice from Moshe through Yahuwah to the people. Because no one wants to be sick, no one wants to have running discharge. That's typically a very negative thing.
Verse 8. And if he that has the discharge spits upon him that is clean, then he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And whatever saddle he rides upon that has the discharge shall be unclean. And whoever touches any object that was under him shall be unclean until the evening. And he that picks up any of those things shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And whoever touches the one that has the discharge, and has not rinsed his hands in Mayim, he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And the vessel of earth that he touches which has the discharge shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in Mayim. And when he that has a discharge is cleansed of his discharge, then he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in running Mayim, and shall be clean. And on the 8th yom he shall take with him 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before Yahuwah to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and give them to the Kohen. And the Kohen shall offer them, the one for a sin offering, and the other one for a burnt offering. And the Kohen shall make keparah for him before Yahuwah for his discharge.
Now, obviously, we don't have to do this particular command no more. There's no need for sin offerings after the ultimate sacrifice of Yahushua, HaMoshiach, when he obviously laid down his life at the stake for us. However, if you wanted to keep it in the scripts, if you find yourself sick at the beginning of the week, at the end of the week, if you would like to come to the Kohen and be, I guess you could say, for lack of better words, spiritually healed as well after your physical condition has been improved, this would be a great way of going about it. Again, doesn't mean that you have to do it, but if you want to keep things in the books, it would be a very told thing to do. But you don't have to bring a turtle dove for sin. That turtle dove has been paid for with the ultimate lamb.
And verse 16. And if any man's semen of emission goes out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And every garment and every skin, on which is the semen of emission, shall be washed with Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. The woman also who lies with a man having semen of emission, they shall both bathe themselves in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And if a woman has a discharge, and in a discharge of her flesh shall be found dam, she shall be separated 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until the evening.
So here we have, now we've gone from illness or body autonomy to now we're talking about sexual relations and things in regards to childbearing, which obviously every time a woman does not produce a child, she goes through a cycle of purity in her body, which concludes with a menstrual cycle that occurs every month. We learned about this in health class and obviously throughout life. But for those who are going through again, the monthly cycle, this pertains to ladies, if you find yourself in a position that you have to sit in the office of some sort of spiritual leadership, it's best if you keep yourself away from that position for the 7 days that you're separated because you are unclean. And again, you're only unclean those 7 days, as we just read.
Verse 20. And everything that she lies upon in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sits upon shall be unclean.
Again, hygiene. No one wants to touch a bloody rag. No one wants to touch human disposal items. It's a health thing, but also for the people involved, the woman included. You don't want to embarrass her or inconvenience her or things of that nature, or yourself. So it's best you leave her things to herself, and obviously she separate herself from situations that can lead to these type of encounters.
Well said. Verse 21. And whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening. And whoever touches anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in Mayim, and be unclean until the evening.
This is only for the woman in Nidah. This is not just across the board.
Verse 23. And if it is on her bed, or on anything on which she sits, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until the evening. And if any man lies with her at all, and her discharge is upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed on which he lies shall be unclean.
So if a man lays down with a woman during her cycle, just like the woman is separated for 7 days due to her unclean state, a man will be unclean for 7 days. There is a gray area. Many would argue it says if the discharge lies upon you. I don't know how you guys do it, but I don't know how you can get away with it. But if you find yourself in a situation, maybe I think accidents happen, you will be unclean for 7 days. So again, men, if you lay down with your wives or concubines, whatever your circumstances are, and you have a situation where she is part of her week of uncleanness, if you find yourself in a position of ministry or leadership for the things of Yahuwah, do not post yourself on that day, be it a weekly moed or annual moed, because you are unclean and unfit for that particular occasion. Doesn't mean you're in sin again. This is just uncleanness. We're trying to keep the things of Yahuwah clean as commanded, and obviously coming in with the right mindset and your temple in the right state of being.
Verse 25. And if a woman has a discharge of her dam many days, but not in the time of her separation, or if it runs beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the discharge of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean.
So these are two separate things. So this is not counting your menstrual cycle. So for example, if you have an internal bleeding, this is a discharge of blood that's not from her time of separation. But things happen. You are unclean until that state of being is removed. Or if you're what we call nidah, which is period, but menstrual cycle extends itself beyond the typical range that is typical of a woman, all the additional days that your nidah has extended is added onto your time of uncleanness. Again, this is just to protect the woman and those immediately around her. It's both a biological health thing, but it also is a spiritual / ritual protection for those who are in a position to serve.
Verse 26. Every bed on which she lies all the days of her discharge shall be to her as the bed of her separation, and whatever she sits on shall be unclean, as the uncleanness of her separation. And whoever touches those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in ma'im, and be unclean until the evening. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, then she shall count to herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th yom she shall take with her 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, and bring them to a kohen, to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the kohen shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other one for a burnt offering. And the kohen shall make keparah for her before Yahuwah for the discharge of her uncleanness. And so shall you separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness, when they defy my tabernacle that is among them.
There you go. So, like I said earlier, your uncleanness is not a sin, but uncleanness can lead to sin. If you find yourself serving in, this says the tabernacle, but just extended. The temple later on, after the tabernacle, and then extended from there, the house of Yahuwah is where 2 or 3 lie there to serve him. So, in this personal dwelling place that we're currently at, if one of us was in this state of uncleanness, serving the Most High, we would be in direct line of Yahuwah's wrath and would be in the path of sin. So, this is not something that has been done away with. I know many don't practice this to their day-to-day because it is inconvenient. I'm not going to lie to you. But if we want to come correct and we want to show ourselves approved, this is part of that proving process. You know, we have to do our very best. Again, mistakes happen, slip-ups occur. But if we're consciously going out of our way to make sure, excuse me, we remain clean and do what we have to do when we're unclean to get back to a state of being clean, it's a beautiful thing.
Verse 32. This is the Torah of him that has a discharge, and of him whose semen goes from him, and is defiled by it, and of her that is sick in her monthly separation, and of him that has a discharge, of the man, and of the woman, and of him that lies with her that is unclean.
So this law is, again, like many laws, it has a cause, a clause, a breakdown of who it applies to, what to do to remedy a situation, and then the recap of the actual new command. A lot of the commandments are a reaction to questions and events that occur. They're not reactive, except for the first 10, which are in Exodus 20. 16.
Read to
We're not going to be Leviticus 16.
Leviticus chapter 16. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe after the death of the 2 sons of Aharon, where they drew near before Yahuwah and died. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, Speak to Aharon your brother, that he come not at all times into the most kadosh place within the veil before the Rachamim seat, which is upon the ark, that he die not. For I will appear in the cloud upon the Rachamim seat.
Pause. So, for those who have not been reading their Parshas, it's okay. There's still time for you. Aaron's 2 sons came before Yahuwah to perform an offering at the wrong time and with the wrong materials, and they offered a strange offering to him. And they were unfortunately vaporized, for lack of better words, by Yahuwah due to their negligence and mistreating of a kadosh thing and making it a common thing with their lack of preparedness when it came to their offering. So Aaron, being a father and obviously a human at the end of the day, is now having to deal with the death of 2 of his boys.
Verse 3. This is how Aharon shall come into the kadosh place, with a bull for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall put on the kadosh linen coat, and he shall have the linen breeches upon his flesh, and shall be dressed with the linen girdle, and with the linen turban shall he be attired. These are kadosh garments. Therefore shall he wash his flesh in ma'im, and so put them on.
So every occasion has an appropriate fit. This was the appropriate fit for Aaron when he was Kohen. I'm not saying that every time you serve as Kohen, you have to be dressed like this, dressed to the nines, as white people would say. But if you wanted to have an idea of what you should look like when it comes to moeds or high gathering of the congregation, this will look pretty spiffy, if you ask me. Also, I know many associates turbans with our I don't want to say Indian, but it's the religion of one of the major religions of the Hindus. Like right now, it's not coming to mind. I want to say skirts, but it's not. It'll come to me. But the one of the major factions in religions in the subcontinent of India, and obviously our Arabian brothers in the Muslim faith that wear turbans. I'm not saying they copied us, but they're not the ones who own this outfit. Sheiks. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So sheiks and Muslims that wear turbans are not the only ones that are allowed to wear turbans. Us men that follow Moshiach, obviously as we can see with Aharon, the high priest, that attire piece is something we can happily adorn every time we take in the office of Kohen, which is high priest.
Verse 5. And he shall take from the congregation of the children of Israel 2 goats for a sin offering, and 1 ram for a burnt offering. And Aharon shall offer his bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make kapparah for himself, and for his ba'it. And he shall take the 2 goats, and present them alive before Yahuwah at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And Aharon shall cast lots upon the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahuwah, and the other lot for the Azazel. And Aharon shall bring the goat upon which Yahuwah's lot fell, and offer it for a sin offering. But the goat, on which the lot fell to the Azazel, shall be presented alive before Yahuwah, to make kapparah over it, and to let it go for an Azazel into the wilderness. And Aharon shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall make kapparah for himself, and for his ba'it, and shall kill the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself.
So, this is a very beautiful thing. Right now, we're going through procedures. These are guidelines that Aaron has to, well, just not Aaron. Anyone who's in Aaron's position has to go through. And we know, once again, sin offering has been completed, not done away with, completed by Yahushua Mashiach. However, this is a practice that we can carry over to today. Before he goes about the business of taking care of those outside of his house, he has to make sure his house is both cleaned, without sin, and in order. And I think that's something that has a foundation anywhere in life. Before you go solve other people's problems, solve your problems. So that when you go to other people's situation, you come level-headed and ready to take on the weight of that other person's burdens, the weight of that other person's situation, because your situation is squared away. It's one of my favorite things. Anyone who reads Dr. Jordan Peterson, he tells you clean your room before you go about the business of judging other people. It's a very small thing, but a place in discord is not going to lend itself to righteous judgment and rulings.
Verse 11. And Aharon shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall make kapparah for himself, and for his ba'it, and shall kill the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself. And he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from off the altar before Yahuwah, and his hands full of sweet incense crushed fine, and bring it within the veil. And he shall put the incense upon the fire before Yahuwah, that the cloud of the incense may cover the rachamim seat that is upon the testimony, that he die not. And he shall take of the dam of the bull, and sprinkle it with his finger upon the rachamim seat that is eastward, and before the rachamim seat shall he sprinkle of the dam with his finger 7 times. Then shall he kill the goat of the sin offering, that is for the people, and bring its dam within the veil, and do with that dam as he did with the dam of the bull, and sprinkle it upon the rachamim seat, and before the rachamim seat. And he shall make kapparah for the kadosh place, because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions and all their sins. And so shall he do for the tabernacle of the congregation, that remains among them in the midst of their uncleanness. And there shall no man in the tabernacle of the congregation, when he goes in to make kapparah in the kadosh place, until he comes out, and has made kapparah for himself, and for his household, and for all the congregation of Israel. And he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahuwah, and make kapparah for it. He shall take of the dam of the bull, and of the dam of the goat, and put it upon the horns of the altar all around. And he shall sprinkle of the dam upon it with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it, and set it apart from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. And when he has made an end of reconciling the kadosh place, and the tabernacle of the congregation, and the altar, he shall bring the live goat.
The live goat being the Azazel that we read about in verse 8.
And Aharon shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat, and confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel, and all their transgressions and all their sins, putting them upon the head of the goat, and shall send it away by the hand of a fit man into the wilderness. And the goat shall bear upon itself all their iniquities to a land not inhabited, and he shall let the goat go into the wilderness. And Aharon shall come into the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall put off the linen garments, which he put on when he went into the kadosh place, and shall leave them there. And he shall wash his flesh with ma'im in the kadosh place, and put on his garments, and come forth, and offer his burnt offering, and the burnt offering of the people, and make keparah for himself, and for the people. And the fat of the sin offering shall he burn upon the altar. And he that let the goat go to Azazel shall wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in ma'im, and afterward come into the camp.
Because the person who touched this goat was unclean. Remember, this goat, live goat, touched something that took on all the uncleanness and sins of Israel. So by proxy, touching it, like we read in the previous chapter, now those laws come into play. He can't be back going into the service, being in a state of uncleanness.
Verse 27. And the bull for the sin offering, and the goat for the sin offering, whose dam was brought in to make keparah in the kadosh place, shall one carry forth outside the camp. And they shall burn in the fire their skins, and their flesh, and their dung. And he that burns them shall wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in ma'im, and afterward he shall come into the camp. And this shall be a chuch le'olam va'ed to you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th yom of the month, you shall afflict your beings, and do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country, or a ger that sojourns among you.
So this is now, if you've been reading along, you're curious why is all this going on this day. This is the ritual procedures that used to take place for the holiday that we're going to observe next Friday, which is Yom HaKippurim, the Day of Atonement, as many know it in English.
Verse 29. And this shall be a chuch le'olam va'ed to you, that on the 7th month, on the 10th yom of the month, you shall afflict your beings, and do no work at all, whether it be of your own country, or a ger that sojourns among you.
So this is an ordinance that you have to do forever. That's what a chuch would be. And it applies to both you and your household, and it even specifies to strangers. So if you are entertaining guests next Thursday evening through Friday evening of next week, so Romans September 29th through Romans September 30th, if you have guests in your home between the evenings, they are supposed to be observing this moeds and its command. If they are not, that responsibility and act of transgression falls at your hand and feet. So be very careful who you have in your household in that 24-hour period.
Verse 30. For on that yom shall the kohen make keparah for you, to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before Yahuwah. It shall be a Shabbaton of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings by a chuch le'olam va'ed. And the kohen, whom she shall anoint, and whom he shall consecrate to attend in the kohen's office in his Abba's place, shall make the keparah, and shall put on the linen clothes, even the kadosh garments. And he shall make keparah for the most kadosh place, and he shall make keparah for the tabernacle of the congregation, and for the altar, and he shall make keparah for the kohanim, and for all the people of the congregation.
Period. So, again, like I've been repeating myself, and I do apologize for that. This is no longer a holiday of mourning due to the sins that we've committed in the 364 days in between Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur. The sins of yesterday, today, and tomorrow have already been absolved due to the actions of our Lord and Savior, Yahushua Mashiach. However, we do this now as a remembrance and as an acknowledgement of those said sins we commit, even though they are pardoned, because his sacrifice, his actions, and his fulfillment of the law was not in exchange for us to go commit transgressions of the said law he fulfilled. So now we host this every 7th month on the 10th day of that said month, we do this ordinance for not only to keep the command, but also now as a celebratory remembrance of what we gain with the death and resurrection of Yahushua. It's a lack of better words, a bittersweet day for many, because it's a day of remembrance of all the wrong you've done, but it's also a reminder of, despite all the wrongs you've done, there is still hope for you. There is grace for you. There is an opportunity for you to live yet another day. It is said many are determined to be killed on that day, from one Kippur to another. It is said as a man-made oral tradition. And I have seen many be killed between those days, so I'm starting to believe the tradition to be true. And killed doesn't mean as in buried 6 feet under. I mean killed as in no longer in the faith. I mean killed as in separated from families, friends, loved ones. I mean completely lost in their own pathways. Death comes in many ways. I pray that from one Yom Kippur to another and one Shabbat to another, anyone who falls short is given the opportunity to shuv and come into a Yom Kippur to absolve themselves once again through the blood of the Lamb, which is Yahushua HaMashiach. Finish off the chapter.
Verse 34. And this shall be an everlasting chuk to you, to make keparah for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And Aharon did as Yahuwah commanded Moshe.
Now, I wanted him to read this verse, not just to fulfill the reading, but to point out, Aaron did this while mourning 2 boys. His 2 own blood and bones. He raised those children. I say children, but they could have been my age, because they were already serving in the office of priest. So imagine your 2 boys of, let's say, age 20 and up. One day to another, they're no longer gone, because they got wiped out by the same God that you serve. And he told you this. And then now he tells you the next day via your brother, oh, go do this in my name and go clean and save the people so that they could be presented as clean. There was no second opportunity for your children. Now you have to go give that second opportunity to the children of people that hate and murmur against you. So why do I present that case in such an ugly way and bring out that ugly side of the Bible? We all think that when we're going through something that this is against us and that our situation is unique, when in reality it's not that unique. There are many times where Torah is but another burden to put on top of the day-to-day struggle we call life. And all the same, you have to do it. Aaron did. I'm not saying that you have to be Aaron and be as strong as him, but he is an example to us. If he can mourn 2 children and yet still burden the burden of the office of Kodeh Hagadol, the high priest. Who are we who work regular jobs? Who are we that we don't dedicate 24/7 to Yahuwah? I don't live, breathe, ate, slept Yahuwah. That was his job as high priest. And he had his world removed from him, and he still did his job to the letter. Obedience comes at a price, but the rewards of obedience are greater than the price that you ever have to pay for. Many poo-poo Aaron for his notable mistakes. But Aaron is a man in the accounts between Exodus and Deuteronomy that I wish many more people followed and copied. Because though he was not as great as Moshe, his works are bested by very few in the 66. Very few have a resume that stacks up to Aaron, the Levi, the father of the Levitical priesthood, really. Because it's his sons who make that. So next time you find yourself in a situation where you're questioning if you should be obedient to the things of Yahuwah, remember Aaron. He lost 2 boys and the next day had to go host Yom Kippur on an empty stomach. And he's barbecuing lambs and bulls and bullocks. Just goes to show you, there's levels to commitment. but there's no reason not to come in. All right, let's jump to the Brit Chadasha, which, if you can read the description, and there's still 2 more chapters for this Parsha weekly reading. So for those who didn't read it before this week, Shabbat, on Monday we'll read it at the Bible study, so that you don't miss out. And it's your job from there to read the next week's, which will be Parsha 28, Parsha reading. We're not going to jump over to Hebrews or Ivrims, and we have to read 1 through 5. I think we're going to pick up the first 2 or 3 and break it down as we've been doing.
Chapters 2 and 3, yeah.
No, starting chapter 1.
Okay.
And as many have pointed out in the past to me, this is a scroll, a letter, a collection of notes that was sent to people that were just like you and I about 2,000 years ago. So when you read the things in Hebrew, these people were keeping the faith the same way we are. They did not see Yahusha. They only saw the apostles that came afterwards as they were going into the world to spread the good news. So these people are just like you and I. Hebrews trying to keep the word that have not seen the man that the word is based on.
Hebrews chapter 1. Eloha, who at various times and in different ways spoke in times past to the Avot of Israel by the Nevi'im, has in these Yamim Acharonim spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the Olamim, who being the brightness of his Teferet, and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the Majesty on high.
So in case you were wondering what is Yahusha in regards to Yahuwah, Hebrews 1 through 3 make it abundantly clear of his position and power. The one and the same. Though we distinguish for our finite understanding Yahusha the greater and Yahuwah the greater and Yahuwah the lesser, Yahusha and Yahuwah are one and the same.
Verse 4, being made so much better than the heavenly Malachim, as he has inherited a more excellent name than them. For to which of the heavenly Malachim said he at any time, you are my son, this yom have I brought you forth? And again, I will be to him an Abba, and he shall be to me a son. And again, when he brings in the first brought forth into Elam, he says, and let all the heavenly Malachim of Eloha worship him. And of the heavenly Malachim he says, who makes his heavenly Malachim Ruachim, and his Avadim a flame of fire. But to the Son he says, your Kisei, O Eloha, is Leolam Vaed, a scepter of Tzedakah is the scepter of your Malchut. You have loved Tzedakah, and hated iniquity. Therefore Eloha, even your Eloha, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows. And you, Yahuwah, in the beginning, have laid the foundation of the earth, and the Shamayim are the works of your hands.
So if Yahusha is the right hand, and the works of the foundation and of the heavens is by his hands, who did the foundation building? Who did the works that we read about so beautifully in the first chapter of Genesis? For those who are following along, it is Yahusha HaMashiach, or Yahuwah the Lesser. But we say that to distinguish him. In all reality, he is just a physical manifestation of the unseen, all-knowing power. But he's still that thing, or that entity, better said, because thing is not appropriate. So do not make Yahusha a Hercules. Do not make Yahusha a Zeus or Jupiter or any historical, mythological God character that we read about. He's not that. He's greater than that. He is literally just an avatar for the greater, which is the host of hosts and the master of masters, Yahuwah. That's why we can proudly and boldly give worship to and in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. And when we do prayers, we say it boastfully and loudly in the name of the Master of the Olam, Yahushua HaMashiach.
Picking up in verse 8. But to the Son he says, your kisei, O Eloha, is Leolam Vayed. A scepter of tzedakah is the scepter of your malchut. You have loved tzedakah and hated iniquity. Therefore Eloha, even your Eloha, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows. And you, Yahuwah, in the beginning have laid the foundation of the earth, and the shamayim are the works of your hands. They shall perish, but you remain, and they all shall grow old as does a garment, and like a mantle you shall fold them up, and they shall be changed, but you are the same, and your years shall not fail. But to which of the heavenly malachim said he at any time, sit on my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool? Are they not all serving Ruachim, sent forth to serve those who shall be heirs of salvation?
That's all the messengers are. What we call angels or messengers, as the translation of the Hebrew word for them is, they're just worker bees. There to help us get back to the Father and keep in line. They are not above us. The only things that are only beings that are above us is the Father and the Son. That's it. That's it. That's how powerful of a creation we are. That's why he sent his only begotten Son, or a manifestation of himself, to go and redeem us, because we were worth that price. So if we're worth that price, the service and the dedication to this Master that is laid out for us in Torah, and in the Tanakh, and in the lost books, and in the books of wisdom, and obviously in the renewed covenant through the writings of the apostles, is nothing. This is chump change compared to the actual price that was paid for us to do this. So, is it a burden? Yes. Is it worth it? Equally yes. If not more.
Chapter 2?
Yes, sir.
Hebrews chapter 2. Therefore we have to give the more earnest attention to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip.
Pay attention to the things you have heard. I will not be here forever. Your mother and father who teach you the ways of Torah will not be here forever. So earnestly pay attention, even if you don't apply in that day, because it is what's going to guide you moving forward, or it ought to, if you want to make your ways the ways of him that came before us and fulfilled the law.
Verse 2. For if the word spoken by heavenly malachim was firm, and every transgression and act of disobedience received a corrective reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, which at first began to be spoken by the Master himself, and was confirmed to us by them that heard him, Yahuwah also bearing them witness, both with signs and wonders, and with different nisim and gifts of the Ruach HaKodesh, according to his own will.
So we find ourselves saying, how come this person got away with this and the other person didn't? If we all were to receive the judgment we were due, we would be missing out on the point of Yahusha. Because every person who commits sin, the wages of sin are paid with death. So every person who's ever committed a sin dies. Done. End of story. In that day. Obviously, if that was the case, if you were the only people that would be walking on this earth now would be children. And at that point, that would go counterintuitive to what the word is supposed to be about. Yahuwah sends us these miracles and wonders and signs and ordinances to keep us on the straight and skinny and narrow, because he knows we're going to do actions that earn us the reward of death. So he gives us his son so that we can be saved from that fate. Doesn't mean that we won't meet that fate of death, because every man is appointed to live and die and be judged shortly after. But that's just the flesh. You have the second death that, thanks to Yahushua, we have an opportunity to, if we do our part, we'll receive extended life into forever. But don't waste your time asking for judgment and proper correction, because if that was the case, we'll all be dead. Minor infractions, major infractions, death is death. How you want to justify it is a human response, not a Yahusha response.
In verse 5. For it is not to the heavenly Malachim that he has subjected the Olam Haba, of which we speak, but the Katuv testifies, saying, What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Ben Adam that you visited him? You made him a little lower than the heavenly Malachim. You crowned him with Tiferet and honor, and did set him over the works of your hands. You have put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he put all in subjection under him, he left nothing that is not put under him. But now we see not yet all things put under him. But we see Yahusha, who was made a little lower than the heavenly Malachim for the suffering of death, crowned with Tiferet and honor, because he tasted death for every man, apart from Eloha, of course.
So, the Ben Adam, Adam, as many know, or Adam, he came in the same model and mold as Yahusha and failed. We know this. It's written in Genesis. All the same, dominion and power and glory was given to him. That's why we read, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, the beasts of the fields. We, to this day, still have dominion over those things. There's not a part of this world that the human race has not conquered. Good job. But to the spiritual matters, we failed. Yahusha had to come clean up that mess from the sons of the Ben Adam. And obviously redeem him himself, the first man. Or better, the first man made with the purpose of this. So, to do what he had to do, he had to come in the same way the first came. So that we can't say you were better. He removed the excuse of, you could do it because you're Yahusha. Wrong. I was like the Ben Adam, like Adam. But unlike Adam, I fulfilled. Adam, unfortunately, did not. Not taking away from his glory. Again, his achievements and achievements of anybody else don't stack up the same way.
Verse 10. For it was fitting for him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to Tiferet, to make the star of their salvation perfect through sufferings.
Perfect through suffering. The prince of their salvation, perfect through sufferings. So if you do not suffer in your life, you will never reach, and remember, I spoke about this on Wednesday. Perfection does not mean without fault. Perfection means complete. You will never reach who you are meant to be in completion without suffering. You need to test the metal. You need to test the walk. You need to test the commitment of the conviction that you say you have. You only are going to be able to do those things through long suffering of the body, of the emotions, of the spirits, of the ruach, of the being, and importantly, of the mind. It's in those areas that you get tested. And you win and lose. You just want to win more than you lose. Because at the end of all those battles is the conclusion of the matter. And when judgment comes, you want to make sure your tally looks a lot more wins than losses. Because if you come in correct, Yahusha's going to tell you who man's is this.
Verse 11. For both he that sets apart and those who are being set apart are all echad, for which reason he is not ashamed to call them Israelite brothers, saying, I will declare your name to my Israelite brothers. In the midst of the congregation will I sing Tehillah to you. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold I and the children that Yahuwah has given me. Since the children share in flesh and dam, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the whole power of death, that is, Satan.
So prior to Yahusha, Satan's power, we know he is the master of the present world. But he also had the power of death. Very powerful being. And Yahusha took that from him. And he went into Sheol and conquered sin and death. And came back up. So you guys know the actual resurrection story is more than just a man suffering. So a lot of cosmic things at play that occurred during that time period. Many people dedicate lives and years of dedication just to the resurrection story, those 3 days. What Yahusha did is nothing short of a nisim, or a miracle, as we translate that word. Not a miracle because he overcame, because that was already prophesied. But the fact that what he overcame and in overcoming what was the byproducts of that set of actions and how it affects us to this very yom. If it doesn't blow your mind, you are a simpleton.
Verse 15. And deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to slavery. For truly he took not on himself the nature of heavenly malachim, but he took on himself the offspring of Abraham. So in every way it behooved him to be made like his Israelite brothers, so that he might be full of rachamim as a faithful Kohen Gadol in things pertaining to Yahuwah, to make kapparah for the sins of the people. For in that he himself has suffering being tried, he is able to help them that are tried.
Again, you can only relate in what you know. So for those who are seeking counsel, do not seek counsel of those who have not been through what you're going through. Opinions of others have to be weighed against Torah. And even with Torah, they have to be weighed against experience. If you never had children, don't give childbearing advice. You never raised children, don't give child raising advice. If you never raised children in Torah, don't give advice on how to raise kids if you're only raising kids in the world. There's so much you can affect by giving improper counsel due to lack of not ability, but experience. Not all counsel is good counsel, even if the intention is told. Like I've said many times off camera, the pathway to hell is coated and paved with good intentions. The nuclear bomb that destroyed Japan had good intentions behind it. It still cost millions of lives. And that's an extreme example, but I can give you many smaller that are not as extreme. Good intentions are not the same as good outcomes. Do not equate the two, because that's a very, very, very slippery slope, and that's why we find ourselves in bad positions, because we consider the person's good intentions, we take the advice, even though it's not according to wisdom or experience, and then we falter. And then we find ourselves in a position that's worse than what we started with before the advice. And then we have the audacity to ask you who or why. You numb, you hurt yourself. Chapter 3.
Hebrews chapter 3. Therefore, Kadosh Israelite brothers, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the Sholiach and Kohen HaGadol of our confession, the Moshiach Yahusha, who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moshe was faithful in all his ba'it. For this man...
Pause. I just noticed the title Shaliach was not given to a regular man. I just thought about that. That's a note. Go ahead.
Verse 3. For this man... They capitalize man. For this man...
Yeah, let's talk about Yahusha.
For this man was counted worthy of more teferet than Moshe, seeing that he who has built the ba'it has more honor than the ba'it. For every ba'it is built by some man, but he that built all things is Eloha.
There you go. So despite all the good you do, despite all the good your generation will do, the person behind you or them is the creator. You can never be greater than Yahusha. Not by works, because he made you, and not by actions that are resulting of your works, because he put those actions to play. Why? Because he did it first, then did it again when he was in the earth, and then came back for a replay when he comes back, as we read in the book of Revelation. That's how good he is. Did it, done it, and gonna do it again.
Verse 5. And Moshe truly was faithful in all his ba'it, as in Aved, for a testimony of those things that were to be spoken later.
Of course, the lawgiver, and besides Yahusha, the only man given the title rabbi. How powerful is that? And as we know, when Yahusha was on the mountain Gethsemane, he was one of the spirits that were there, present, alongside Elijah, the prophet. So Moshe is not an insignificant man. Do not take this as a belittling of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is, again, as Yahuwah's direct words say, the meekest man to ever walk the earth, before and after. And there's a lot of men who could fit that title, but none come close. And he was so great that his bones were hidden, as if he was Yahusha himself. Because he knew the effect he would have on the people if they knew where he was buried. So, again, like I keep pointing out, you stack your resume against Moshe, you're going to fail really bad. And even that man is still very short compared to the works of our Creator. Again, that's why I say what he did for us is nothing short of a miracle. And to not accept it as a wow, why he did that for us, it's just too simple.
Verse 6. But the Moshiach, as a son over his own Bait, whose Bait we are, if we hold fast the confidence in the Gilah of our Tikvah firm to the end. Therefore, as the Ruach HaKodesh says, today if you will hear his voice, harden not your levavot, as in the rebellion, in the yom of trials in the wilderness.
There you go. Harden not your hearts, as in the rebellion of the trials in the wilderness. Everything we read from Exodus 12 to Deuteronomy 31 were trials and tribulations of our forefathers. And unfortunately, every man and woman died. But the children who were willing to listen became the generation of Nun, a good generation. That's all that separated them. Listening and obeying.
Verse 8. Harden not your levavot, as in the rebellion in the yom of trials in the wilderness, when your avot tried me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore I was grieved with that generation, and said, they do always go wayward in their levavot, and they have not known my halachot.
So, there you go. If you find yourself always going your way, how can you say you're doing the things of Yahuwah? That's just trying to put a circle through a square peg. It's just not going to work. It's just the wrong situation. You're either doing his way or you're doing your way. But there is not the same. You hope that your intentions and acts lend yourself to the ways of Yahuwah. But if you find yourself not fulfilling those things, perhaps you need to reconsider your position in the situation you're in, because something has to give, either you or the Torah. And I will tell you, I'd rather you give in on your desires and go 100% on the things of Torah than vice versa. There's life in one hand, there's death in the other. I want you to live. But I will respect your choice because free will has been given. It is my job to be a shepherd to both the lost sheep and the sheep that want to be found.
Verse 11. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. Listen, Israelite brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil love of unbelief in departing from the living Aloha. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you become hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of the Moshiach, if we hold on to the beginning of our confidence firm to the end. While it is said, today if you will hear his voice, harden not your levavot as in the rebellion. For some, when they had heard, did rebel. Was it not those that came out of Mitzrayim with Moshe? Although not all of them. But with whom was he grieved for 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they should not enter into his rest, but to them that believed not? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief.
That was the secret sin. Unbelief. Unbelief leads to doubt. Doubt leads to a mindset and body makeup that lends itself to the ways of the world. Because if you don't believe, you have no fear. And with no fear, there is no wisdom to guide your steps. And you find yourself walking in your way against the ways of you. Your end will be concluded before you take your first step. Destruction, chaos, and your being removed from Kol Yisrael. Very simple, very clean. It's one of my favorite things about Torah. There are black and whites. There are a lot of grays, but the black and whites are beautiful because there is no, but what about that? There is none of that. It's do it or don't, but this is what it is. And it does lend itself to some very harsh conversations where we as partakers have to talk about those black and whites. But if we are to believe the words to be true and the consequences of those that we don't keep to be true, eh, again, like I said, it lends itself to some very deep conversations that have very long lasting effects. All right, we're going to read forward and end it there. So,
Hebrews chapter 4. Let us therefore fear, while the promise of entering into his rest remains, lest any of you should seem to come short of it. For to us was the Besorah proclaimed, as well as to them. But the word proclaimed did not profit them, since it was not mixed with any in them that heard it. For we who have believed do enter into the rest, as he said, As I have sworn in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. For behold, the works were finished from the foundation of the Olam.
there you go. So, the works of the end were fulfilled, already done from the beginning. We just got to keep up and catch up. So that's the type of long game Yahuwah plays.
For he spoke in a certain place of the Shabbat in this manner, and Eloha did rest on the seventh yom from all his works. And in this place again they shall not enter into my rest. Seeing therefore it stands that some will surely enter into it, and they to whom it was first proclaimed enter not because of unbelief. And again, after so long a time, he appointed another yom, as it is written above. For David said, Today if you will hear his voice, harden not your levavot. For if Yahusha, son of Nun, had given them rest, then would he not afterward had spoken of another yom. There remains therefore a Shabbat keeping duty to the people of Eloha.
Shabbat keeping duty. Or as many know it,
Shabbat guarding piety.
set apart living. Shabbat is not just a day. Shabbat is a mindset. Shabbat is a style of living. Yes, the day 7 is a day in the week unto itself because it is the day we enter for rest, as commanded in the first 10. However, the days and moments leading up to Shabbat are just as important as the actual day of Shabbat. Because if you come incorrect, the Shabbat for you is ruined. Because you are no different than those who heard and hardened their hearts. Shabbat is a very, very, very good way for you to litmus test yourself weekly. If you find yourself coming into Shabbat messed up more times than correct, there's something wrong with you. You have to address the wrong. Because you cannot be fumbling the bag. That's what's happening. And I speak frankly because I think too many times people get lost in the sauce when it comes to, I can't wait to get the Shabbat and it's a day off and get to see brothers and sisters. And they treat it as a common gathering, like how you do a birthday or a family dinner. It is not that. That can happen, but it's not that. It is a day unto Yahuwah for us as a reward for our Shabbat keeping ways. It is a day for us to enter to the east gates, the gate of horse, to engage with our Father who is in heaven throughout the week. So, please, you have to treat Shabbat like an interview. You want to get hired. Anyone who's ever been through a job interview knows what you have to do to get that job. You have to come correct, you have to speak correct, and you have to present yourself the best you can. But before you get to that job interview, you do a lot of preparation to make sure all those things come into play correctly. You don't just wake up and go to a job interview. Unless you expect not to get the job. Then at that point, why were you there in the first place?
I left off. I just started in chapter 4, verse.
You left off at 10.
10. Thank you. I'm sorry. Verse 10. For the one that is entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works, as Yahuwah did from his. Let us labor, therefore, to enter into that future Shabbat, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. For the word of Yahuwah is quick and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing between the being and the ruach, and between the joints and marrow and bone, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the life. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and open before the eyes of him to whom we have to answer. Seeing then that we have a great Kohen Gadol, that is passed into the Shamayim, Yahusha son of Yahuwah, let us hold fast our confession. For we have not a Kohen HaGadol who cannot be touched with the feeling of our weaknesses, but he was in all points tried like we are, yet he was without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the Kisei of favor, that we may obtain Rachamim and find favor to help in our time of need.
Hebrews 5 has something that... Read Hebrew 5 only because it has a point that I actually wanted to make for next week's Bible study, but I think it's important for today. So just, you can read it. I'm not going to make too many stops.
Yeah, no problem.
But
Hebrews chapter...
It's okay, almost.
Just read. Don't worry.
Sorry. Hebrews chapter 5. For every Kohen HaGadol taken from among men is appointed for him in things pertaining to Yahuwah, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is the one who can humble himself and have rachamim on the ignorant who go astray, for that he himself also is surrounded with weaknesses.
There you go. That's the verse I wanted to touch upon. He that is one who can humble himself and have mercy on the ignorant who go astray. So, if Yahusha can have the ability to humble himself. So, this is the master of the universe. This is the one above all. Someone better than you and I can say, all right, I know you messed up, but it's okay. Who are we? Who are we? Are we greater than Yahusha? Are we greater than he who created us? Are we greater than the person who did what we did, or better said, did what we're trying to do and actually did it? While we fumble with the basic of the commands, he did all the commands. Who are we? Like, do we think ourselves to be Elohim, as Hasatan lied and said to Eve when she fell in her sin, excuse me. Though dominion has been granted in part and given to us, that does not make us greater than the person who created what we have dominion over. So, Hebrews 5:2, I'm going to talk about it in next week's Bible study, but this concept of restoration, this concept of actively forgiving, not just, oh, I forgive what you did, but you treat that person forever in accordance to their sin. You cut off communications. You remove the ability for Ahava to be abound. You forgive, don't forget, and forever chastise. That is the current model that we follow in church, temple, shul, and I'm sure in mosque and many other religious institutions. I've seen it with my own eyes. Rather than actually loving one another and seeing past the mistake and looking to rectify, we don't humble ourselves. We don't put ourselves in that person's position. We don't even try. We don't. Because if we did, the world would be, I believe, a much better place. But we're too busy breaking Matthew 5 of judging instead of not judging. Matthew 6, excuse me. Go ahead.
Verse 3. And because of these he is obliged to sacrifice for the people, and also for himself, on account of his own sins. And no man takes this honor to himself, but he that is called of Yahuwah, as was Aharon.
So was Aaron. So this is not again, I keep saying talking about Yahusha, but any man that takes the responsibility of trying to do right becomes a Kohen. And in that role, you have example. You have the example of Yahusha. You have the example of Aaron, Moshe, Yahusha ben Nun, so on and so forth. Why? Because if we are supposed to be imitators of him, that includes both our walk, but our day-to-day interactions. You don't just stop being a believer. when you want to. You don't just stop being a righteous ruler when you want to be. That is, either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. There's no off switch for that. And every time you think there's an off switch for that, what you're really doing is, I know the ways of Yahuwah, but I want to do my way. Because if I feel that's how I'm justified. But then, when it's the judgment seat for you, all you want is the ways of Yahuwah, because you know that's the softer way. You know that's what's going to lead to a better outcome for you than, unfortunately, the righteous ruling of man. We have to stop playing the game of mercy for me and judgment for you. Or even the worst version of that game, mercy for you, but at any point I can bring up your past and judge you. If I have been forgiven by the Master and you have forgiven me, do not retrofit my judgment. This is not double jeopardy. This is not how the game is played. Because if that's how you're going to play it, then no man will ever reach a peace that is beyond all understanding. No man will reach the Rahamim seat that we just read in chapter 4 of Hebrews that we're supposed to petition to so that we can rejoin the one who came for us. It's these little things, as I say, the doubles in the details. Let's not add more to him that is evil, and let's do more of the good that is Yahusha.
Verse 5. So also the Moshiach esteemed not himself to be made a Kohen HaGadol, but he that said to him, You are my son, today have I brought you forth. As he says also in another place, You are a Kohen Leolam Vayed after the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up tefillot and supplications with strong crying and tears to him that were able to save him from death and was heard, through he was the son. Though he was the son, yet he learned obedience by the things that he suffered. And he grew to be perfect, and he became the author of eternal salvation to all them that obey him. Called of Yahuwah a Kohen HaGadol after the order of Melchizedek, about whom we have many things to say, but some are hard to explain, seeing you are dull of hearing. For when by this time you ought to be morim, you have the need that someone teach you again the first principles of the primary writings of Yahuwah, and have become those that need milk and not strong meat.
Again, I had an exchange on the last live on the comments with someone, Salvation of Yahuwah, I think their name was. And I replied to them saying, being led or being a leader is a choice. I said that because I had this verse in mind, and I replied to them. People are quick to say, oh, I don't agree, so I'm going to do my own thing. People are quick to say, oh, you're wrong, but don't come with a teachable ruach. And then we all become chiefs, no Indians, because no one can humble themselves. I find myself today where I'm at out of a consequence of a series of actions. Not because I woke up and wanted to be a rabbi. But with that, I take the full responsibility of this position because I know what was taught to me by those that were better than me, those that knew more than me, those who were in tune with the Ruach well before I knew how to piss and pee right. Because, as it said here, the things that we argue about should not be things that we should argue about. Forgiveness is an elementary matter. Being obedient is an elementary matter. How to love a brother or sister is elementary stuff. Let's not talk about Daniel. Let's not talk about Revelations. Let's not talk about all these things that are secondary and trinary items. We're still stuck on how to forgive and love. How are you going to understand the prophecies laid out by the prophets if you can't even complete the minimum? It's very similar to when Yahusha spoke to that rabbi. You call yourself a teacher, but you know now the things of the heavenly. You know the things of the heavenly kingdom. How is that? It's excuse my language, but it's ass backwards. Many of our leaders, and I'm not even going to talk about the disciples. Many of our leaders should be disciples. And many of the disciples that are too afraid to take position should be leaders. Because they fulfill the elementary better than the people they actually steward under. And that's not always. There's many great leaders. I know many personally. And I have heard and read of many in faraway lands and nearby. But we have a lot that either have been leader too long and have forgot these elementary manners, now need milk again after having many years of meat, or many years, or we have many teachers that think they've been eating meat and really it's tofu. And I'm sorry to tell you, you're just full of crap. So it like a baby who's crying right now. People are crying out for truth, but the things that they're crying out for are things that are well beyond them until they master the elementary matters.
Verse 13. For everyone that uses milk is unskilled in the word of tzedakah, for he is a baby.
So what does that mean for you? If you know someone is still learning and digesting the ways of Torah, don't take advice from them. Don't use them as your testable witnesses. That doesn't mean that they're not worthy of these things. They will be one day. But go to your seasoned counsel. Go to your seasoned vet. People who have put the time, the work, the labor, that their words and actions are echad. Why? Because those are the people that are going to lead you right. I'm not saying those people are perfect. But those people will have more to bring than the person who, as it says here, is still in the milk. A baby doesn't tell a mother how to feed it. A child does not tell a father how to walk it or how to walk. So, if you're a baby, boast in that. But if you're something that is beyond the milk drinking stage, take charge and start teaching those who are on milk so that we all can be meat eaters and we can all be teachers. That's your job at that point. You've taken in enough milk, you've matured, you have what you got. Don't be stingy.
Last verse, 14. But strong meat belongs to them that are mature, even those who by reason of using the word have their senses exercised to discern both tov and evil.
Seasoned and exercised. Meaning that you've been there, you've done that, or you're being there now and you're doing that now, so that when the next trial and tribulation comes that someone else is going through that's similar to the situation you just overcame, you can be the tov and seasoned counsel. You can be in the council of many there is a good report for that person. You can be that trusted witness when it comes to establishing a matter by 2 or 3 mouths. Let's stop making excuses of, oh, it's hard to keep Torah because life. That's nonsense. Because I know people who rearrange their whole life to save a couple $1,000s to go on vacation. I know people who go on crazy diets for 2-3 months so that they can look good for an Instagram picture and a cute little caption. But they can't give up 30 minutes to go to Bible study during the week. Yeah, forbid I ask you to do that. Priorities, people. Priorities. And it's okay. You have today. You have today. And I pray you have tomorrow. But tomorrow's not promised. So let's try to be better today. And make decisions today that lead to eternal life. Because though the sin of death, the sin that leads to death has been overcome by, we have very excited dogs. We have to make sure that we do not fall on our laurels and become the fatted kid that we are called so cutely Yeshurun. Let us be mature. Let's be those who enjoy shalom. So, with that was the reading of the Brit Chadasha, and personally the end of today's service. I encourage again, all those who have not read this week's Parsha, Leviticus 15 through 18, and today's Brit Chadasha, which is, we read almost all of it, which is Hebrews 1 through 5, to read that in your spare time. Today is a day of rest. Today is a day to dedicate to the things of Yahuwah. So if you have loved ones that are with you, your wife, your husband, children, if you have those, spend the time to tell them about Yahusha and what he did for us. Take the time to talk about Yahuwah and what he is in our lives. Dwell and meditate on the word today, because it's going to set up how you lead the rest of your week. As I said in earlier this week's televised event, we are doing Bible studies Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We do it through Google Meet. If you're curious, in the comment section, put your number so I can add you to a WhatsApp group that we have, so that I can add you to a Google Stream. We're trying to grow. We're trying to invite people who are seeking and are hungry for the word of Yahuwah. And we want to grow alongside with you. You don't have to be part of our fold. You don't have to be part of our walk. But if you believe Yahushua HaMashiach is Echad and one and the same with Yahuwah, and you believe that the commandments of Moshe and the commands laid out and the major and minor prophets are still valid today, there's common grounds for us to grow together. There's common grounds. Though we not walk eye to eye, we can walk shoulder to shoulder, and we can start doing the work of our Father's harvest. There's a lot of work. Not a lot of workers. Just like the real economy right now. So, with that, stay cool. Read your Bibles. If you're in Florida or in the infected area, stay dry. Stay prepared. And know that we love you here from Ahava and Torah. Peace.